But the big thing with nuclear energy is nuclear energy does not produce CO2. If you're concerned about carbon emissions or as a greenhouse gas and causing global warming, then this solves that. Nuclear energy produces, by the way, 20% of the power in the United States, and it produces about 10% of the power worldwide. But this new reactor is an advanced design that no one has really, thought about as far as going into this small with nuclear for the purposes of, producing power.
Can I pause for a second and just note that we got Brian on here who's getting Congressman Massey on, and our typical lineup includes like homeless people that believe in Bigfoot.
Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show, your source for common sense politics on the We Are Libertarians network. The Brian Nichols Show is the fastest growing liberty podcast that brings together people from all means of political thought as we seek to have meaningful conversations about the issues you care about. At the Brian Nichols Show, our goal is to leave the audience educated, enlightened, and informed. And now your host, Brian Nichols.
Well, happy Wednesday there, folks. Brian Nichols here on the Brian Nichols Show. Thank you for joining us again on another, of course, fun-filled episode. But I don't know what it is about Wednesdays, but we are going to class. And today we're talking all things nuclear energy. So strap in, put on your thinking caps, and really just soak in this information because Mark Schneider's on the program today, and we're talking all things nuclear energy. Now, I know a lot of questions people have. Are nuclear power plants safe? I mean, are they efficient? Are they safe for the environment? Those are all common questions. And guess what? Today, not only does Mark help go through and address a lot of those concerns, but it actually shows how the advancement of technology has taken those initial objections and has actually turned them into part of the tools needed to help produce clean alternative energy, in this case, using nuclear energy. To quote one Penn Jillette, and I got to pull it up here. I tweeted this the other day. If the stupid hippies hadn't killed nuclear power, we'd have nuclear power plants safer and cheaper than coal-fired plants all over, and electric cars really would be zero emissions. Penn Jillette, back, I think that's a few years back. And my goodness, today on our conversation with Mark Schneider, it really paints the picture how now is a great chance for us to restart the narrative. And I think it's on us to make sure we are presenting information that does, in fact, set that record straight. So, with that being said, on to the show. Mark Schneider here on The Brian Nichols Show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brian.
Absolutely, Mark. We're talking about nuclear energy today, and this is a topic I've been getting just tons of people saying, Brian, please, can we do an episode focusing on nuclear energy? I've had Alex Epstein on the program. He did his moral case for fossil fuels, where we looked at a little bit of nuclear energy. We talked about, I'm not sure if you're familiar, over on Netflix, Zac Efron did his Down to Earth series where he traveled all around the globe. And his first stop was to, I forget the type of planet it was, but it was funny because we didn't even talk about nuclear in the episode. And Zac Efron's dad is a nuclear scientist. And Alex pointed that was a little weird omission in the conversation there, talking about alternative forms of energy. But yes, nuclear energy. I've heard this brought up time and again. Brian, you need to have somebody in the show to talk about the value of nuclear energy going forward, and really to show if people aren't really talking about it, they're not really serious in the conversation for renewable energy going forward. So with that being said, Mark, introduce yourself to the program and what got you so fascinated that you wanted to talk about nuclear energy here on a libertarianish podcast.
All right. So I spent 23 years in the nuclear industry. I served in the Navy, worked on both submarines and aircraft carriers, and then I did 3 years working for Dominion Energy. And now it's just kind of a hobby. I promote, nuclear energy. So that's kind of the quick background on myself. I was an operator. You go through lots and lots of training on how nuclear physics works and all that. But the big thing that really started fascinating me, and my wife is also a nuclear engineer. We have the nerdiest pillow talk on the planet. But
that's good.
She's way smarter than me. But we talk and communicate and discuss things about the advanced reactor design systems, right? And so really for fun and entertainment, I did a bunch of research and learning about these advanced designs and how they operate. And some of them are super, super fascinating and super cool. And I'm going to bring it right up from the beginning because it's a super awesome design, and that's the Aurora, which is by a company called OKLA. This reactor went into licensing process on March 11th, 2020. It's a 3-year licensing process. Federal regulation requires a 3-year time period. It's arbitrary. It just is. But it is. It's going to run on spent nuclear fuel, or nuclear waste, as everyone likes to call it, from EBR-2, which was a test reactor back in the 1960s that operated into the 80s. So we've got a brand new reactor design. It's a micro reactor, meaning it's small, so it can be built in a factory. So you build most of the components in factories, you do most of your testing, bring it together at the final site, assemble modules, do your final testing, and then bring the reactor online, which is going to reduce the construction costs and construction times. The nuclear industry is actually really good at this. If you look behind, you see USS Washington. That's a version of a modular reactor. That's a nuclear-powered submarine, and we build them in a factory. The U.S. is turning out a nuclear reactor every 6 months that way. So, we have the capability of it, but it's primarily on the shipbuilding side. So we can do this, land-based size. The Aurora is a 1.5 megawatt reactor that's about 1,000 homes, and it fits on a quarter-acre lot. Quarter-acre lot's your standard lot of for a home, right? Just a standard suburban home is on about on a quarter acre. But the big thing with nuclear energy is nuclear energy does not produce CO2. If you're concerned about carbon emissions or as a greenhouse gas and causing global warming, then this solves that. Nuclear energy produces, by the way, 20% of the power in the United States, and it produces about 10% of the power worldwide. But this new reactor is an advanced design that no one has really, thought about as far as going into this small with nuclear for the purposes of, producing power. But, these things are designed where you basically fuel them once every 20 years. So you put a, new reactor core in every 20 years. And that's a relatively simple process with the Aurora reactor design. And that's one of the things that's really fascinating. But the big thing when you talk nuclear energy, I do like to talk about the impact that nuclear has had with renewables. So in 2009, California decided to shut down, it's called SONGS, which is Santa Fe Nuclear Generating Station down. It was just north of San Diego in the Southern California area. And that's the year that the rolling blackouts began in California every summer. And then now we see right now that Governor Cuomo and the mayor of New York City are talking about how New Yorkers need to conserve their electricity in the summer because they're about to have to, or they're going to have to go into rolling blackouts. Well, literally 2 months ago, they shut down Indian Point nuclear power generating station. So every time we shut down nuclear, you see the fact that renewables can't keep up. So they have to, basically use rolling blackouts or to switch over to fossils. And in a lot of cases, it's both. When New York shut down Indian Point, their carbon emissions spiked by 35% overnight. So that's one of those crazy things when you look at it, that we know nuclear is carbon free and we have evidence of it. And, so we know it can. But the big thing is getting to the future about how do we go from these large scale reactors that take a decade to build onto, how quickly can we build these? And when you get into modular construction, that's probably the best way to get there.
Wow, that's a lot of notes to start off. So usually my paper I have here for my trusty notes when I'm going through and trying to recap episodes and stay up to date with what we're talking about is it's usually going to take about 25 minutes to fill a page. I think I have a full page right now in the first 5 minutes. So that's impressive because you're going through, and let's kind of start off here from how we approach things at the program through the sales-based lens, right? Solutions-based selling particularly. And in this really way you've outlined what nuclear is and the impact that nuclear has already, and then showing the impact that we know nuclear can have. And you're starting to touch on a lot of, I say really number one, the number one objection I've seen about nuclear is the safety of nuclear, particularly in the waste of nuclear. Not only does this Aurora from OKLA run on nuclear waste, but it lasts for 20 years. That's like fascinating. That's incredible that the technology is to the point now where one of the main objections that I remember hearing is now being resoundingly answered. So I would say, number one, that's a great way to overcome that objection. But let's be real, Mark. There's going to be folks out there who are going to be fighting tooth and nail against nuclear. So what are some of those common attacks that you hear from folks who say, no, nuclear is not the way to go? What's their argument?
So the arguments usually come into nouns, and it's two nouns, and it's Chernobyl and Fukushima because of the accidents. Chernobyl was terrible, killed 51 people. You have the area of Pripyat that is now an exclusion zone. Fukushima, we melted down 3 reactors, destroyed a total of 4. And I say we because I own that as part of the industry, right? I use we in this, and that I'm going to own my failures. But we have to look at it. Those were 1960s design reactors. And Chernobyl is the big one. What about Chernobyl? I said, well, Chernobyl didn't have a containment structure. So the containment, if it had one, it would have worked as designed. It would have kept, the explosion that occurred because they had a steam explosion. And then with Fukushima, if we'd have let the operators at TEPCO, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, if we'd have let them actually do their job and not require the government to say yes to a bunch of things, those reactors wouldn't have exploded.
Time out. Explain that. I'm curious. What do you mean the government not letting them do their jobs? What did the government do in Fukushima there, not letting them do their jobs that could have prevented it?
So when in the United States, the shift manager can release radioactive gases into the atmosphere because they have the health and safety of the public at the forefront. They don't have to ask permission. They're going to do it, and the government's going to respond based on the way the plant operates. That's how the U.S. does it. In Japan, in order to do that, they have to get permission from government entities. And so they didn't get the permission to vent off the gas. And because the reactor was generating a bunch of hydrogen gas, it built up, and you basically had 4 little mini Hindenburg, well, actually macro Hindenburg explosions, right? So you have 4 hydrogen gas explosions.
Casual. No big deal. Thanks,
Yeah.
government. Isn't government great? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought. But I thought that was important to make sure we focused on.
That's great. And then the other government intervention with both those events is that, they have these forced evacuations, right? They have got themselves and the public so afraid of radiation that you can't be anywhere near it. Radiation is bad. But there's a band. There's actual studies that say that if you don't get enough radiation, you will actually die of cancer at higher rates than people who do receive radiation, right? Your body has to develop a defense mechanisms against those cancer cells that are produced in your body. You have to find that right band. And I'll tell you, the airline industry actually has higher rates of cancer due to radiation exposure than the nuclear industry does. Because pilots fly, they get a lot of solar radiation. But it's natural, right? We always hear, well, it's natural. Well, you know what? Cyanide is natural too, but I'm not going to go around, inhaling a bunch of cyanide, right? So we have to understand that just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good for you. So an understanding of the different aspects, of how radiation works and all that. And I've gone way into my train of thought, so you want to steer me back where I need.
Yeah. No. So we'll go back because the common objections, right? You started to touch on the first being Chernobyl, Fukushima, so those being tossed out, and then you started talking about more the radiation being bad. What other objections do you see going through the industry in terms of people standing against nuclear energy?
So the other one is cost, and we've already discussed that with the modular construction, right? So once you get modular construction, it drops the price, and we know it drops the price. We've seen it in the industry. It's just no one wants to listen to the fact that we do it on submarines all the time. And then the big one, like we talked about, is the waste. And a lot of people, because the waste lasts a long time, right? But it's highly controlled. Nuclear waste has killed exactly 0 people on planet Earth, right? And people don't realize that. You can walk up to you could go up to the Trojan power station, what's left of it, right? Trojan shut down in the 90s. And they're literally all that's left is the switchyard and the casks that contain the nuclear waste, the spent nuclear fuel that OKLA can run on. And you can walk up and hug those things and no problem, right? It's when you got to pull these things apart. They're difficult to pull apart, So, and the waste, they get talking about terrorism. And I'm like, you know what? If I'm a terrorist, I'm not going to a nuclear site to get the waste. I'm going to a hospital to get radiation therapy treatments, right? Radiotherapy treatments, because there's less security. It's easier to handle. It's portable. It's designed to be portable. Nuclear waste is not designed to be portable. It's designed to be the opposite of portable. So that's the other thing. And the other thing, well, it's going to stack up the quantity of it. So again, we talked about time, how big they are, how much waste they generate. We haven't talked about the fuel density, right? A gummy bear of uranium contains as much energy as a ton of coal, right? So a giant mound of coal, like 3 rail cars worth of coal, and I might have the numbers off here, is equal to 1 gummy bear. Your lifetime in a traditional nuclear reactor can be powered off of 1 soda can's worth of uranium. But if we switch to advanced reactor designs, you can power 20 lifetimes off of that 1 soda can of uranium, because we're using all the energy instead of just 5% of the energy. So, and it's very dense. When you look at that submarine behind me, it operates for 33 years, and the nuclear waste from it will fit in a 55-gallon trash can. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so now, folks, we've heard we have the product. It is nuclear. To the problem that we see, folks out there: number 1, energy, the energy crisis. Number 2, climate change. So let's focus on those problems right now. We're offering the solution. We hear the objections, so now we know what to prepare for to overcome them. So let's focus on the positive outcomes. We're selling this to your average person. They're a little weary of nuclear because they've heard these objections throughout all of their life, pretty much. They've watched the documentaries of the mutants from Chernobyl, right? Wasn't that documentary or a mockumentary? That's right.
Yeah.
So when you're selling to folks, I would always argue it's important to help show that better future. So I'd say, Mark, let's give you the magic wand. You're helping us sell this to your average person. What would that magic future look like for folks if we did embrace this as the solution?
So that magic future would actually look a lot like France or Ontario, Canada. And they're very similar, right? In geographic size, not necessarily in population, but also an energy mixture, right? So France is 70% nuclear, 25% hydro, and 5% others. And they have 5% carbon emissions in their electrical grid. Ontario is about equivalent to that. And when you compare that to Germany, which is, by the way, the most carbon emitting nation in Europe, which is basically embraced renewable energy, right? You can look and you can see the comparison of the two. You can basically remove all this, all these pollutants you're putting in the atmosphere from fossil fuels. But the other thing when you're looking at nuclear energy is that nuclear energy actually has a great safety record. If you look at the amount of deaths per unit of energy, nuclear has the lowest, except for solar farms, right? And that's including Chernobyl.
Wow.
If you exclude Chernobyl, it becomes the lowest by a long shot. And part of that is the way the industry works. You have a government regulator, and there are pros and cons to using the government in this, but you have a government regulator that basically sits at the site, making sure that the operator, or ensuring that the plant is following their safety protocols. They're using, all the, meeting, not just the nuclear aspect, but safety aspect, right? The number 1 killer of people in the wind and solar industry are falls, right? They're not wearing their proper safety gear. The United Kingdom is killing a person a month off of wind turbines alone, right? Whereas the nuclear industry, it's, I don't like talking about the death rate because this is a scary thing, but the fact is the nuclear industry strives to actually get that to 0, whereas wind and solar's death is ramping up. In the United States, roofers, the roofing industry has seen a 15% increase in deaths due to rooftop solar installation, right? So the fact is that when you look at wind and solar, they're not the safe things that everyone wants to talk about. They're actually extremely dangerous because they're not very regulated. They don't have someone going around and watching them do that. Because half the time you go to a wind farm, I have friends that they got out of the Navy and went and worked in the wind industry because the pay is great. but they're climbing up on these 300, 600 foot tall wind turbines by themselves. There's no one within miles of them. If they don't put their fall harness on, it's on them. But if you work at a nuclear plant, right, you've got other people around you. And I, having done it, right, I had to wear a fall harness, and you did not dare walk up a ladder that required, or an area that didn't require a fall harness without having that on, out of risk of losing your job, right? So the fact is, or getting, and as a company, getting a fine by the regulator, right? So the fact is the nuclear industry has embraced regulation to a point of ensuring that safety is paramount in, the idea of producing energy.
Can I play devil's advocate now about regulation?
Absolutely.
Because back to your original point about the cost of regulation, you use Japan specifically. Is that maybe a threat, a looming threat? If we were to do our SWOT analysis of nuclear energy, one of those threats coming down the road was, as nuclear energy becomes more and more prevalent, that would incentivize more regulation that could lead to more disasters like Fukushima?
So when you look at the advances in reactor technologies that can be installed in current reactor systems, and that we're testing, the United States is testing this stuff, and Russia and China are testing a lot of these things. There are fuel designs that basically would have, that if they were, that exist today, that are in the final phases of in commercial testing, that if you went, you put that fuel design into the reactors at Fukushima, like let's say we could go back in time to March 10th, 2011. If you stuck all those, that fuel into those reactors, they may have melted down because of a loss of cooling, but they would not have generated any hydrogen gas. So you would have not had the explosions. So just with technologies that we have today that are just almost down the line, that are being installed, final phases to be mass used, we're seeing an improved in safety. And then when you get to designs like the Aurora actually has safety features that prevents it from being able to melt down. And the United States proved this with the EBR-2 reactor, actually. The EBR-2 reactor, they showed that they could shut down, gave it a worse than Fukushima scenario. It shut itself down, went to a hot idle state, and stayed there till they decided to bring it back online. So when you change the designs of reactors, going away from water as your cooling, you actually develop a better safety margin. And that's one of the big arguments, the advanced nuclear arguments, like, well, but what about sodium? Sodium's explosive. And I'm like, well, yeah, okay, liquid sodium is explosive if it gets in contact with water, but you put nitrogen blankets on these things, and it's really not, there's actually never been an issue of a sodium explosion at a nuclear power plant. And by the way, Russia operates several of these on their submarines, and they have large-scale commercial reactors that operate using sodium coolant.
You just haven't had them get tested against aliens, have you, Mark?
Aliens, or I like to think of velociraptors with freaking laser beams on their forehead. Like that's
either way.
That's the big thing. There's a famous article, at least nuclear famous article, talking about what happens if you were to breach a nuclear power plant and try to swim down to touch or what would happen to your body if you were to swim into the spent fuel pool where the spent fuel is stored until it's into long-term storage. And it talks about the effects of the radiation. But the very last line of the article says, but don't worry, you wouldn't make it past the first 2 feet before your blood basically filled the top of the pool as you were, riddled with bullets from the security guards.
Yeah. Well, so let's do this. We're wrapping up. We've already painted the better picture, but let's outline an objective timeline, because I think this is where people sometimes are like, this sounds great. Will I ever see this actually happen? You're talking about the Aurora. It's actually out there. It's a product that is now going into production. We're seeing it being embraced. So what's the timeline look for this nuclear future? Is this something we're going to see 5, 10, 15 years, Mark?
So right now it's looking like spring of 2023 that OKLA should be breaking ground on their first Aurora in Idaho in spring of 2023. Also, another company, NuScale, does a more advanced design of a traditional reactor that's modular, smaller. than the current large-scale reactors. And they've got a 12-unit facility that they're going to break, also in Idaho, they're going to break ground on as well, right around that same time frame. Wyoming is in the process of changing legislation and working with TerraPower to build a test reactor design there. There are three other government sites that are selected for advanced reactor designs. The Russians broke ground and are building a brand new fast reactor that's going to run on nuclear waste out in, I think it's in more of the central area of Russia. I don't know specifically. The Chinese have several advanced designs that they are working on right now. So when you look at the timeline, this stuff is here now under construction, and it's rapidly coming to the forefront. We see lots and lots of companies that are pushing forward, developing agreements. Last I heard, NuScale has agreements like 12 different countries to build nuclear reactors in nations like South Africa, Poland, Ukraine, United States, maybe Canada, maybe the United Kingdom. So they're looking, their first 12-unit facility is going to break ground, but they're looking in the next decade, potentially like 200 to 300 of their 75 megawatt units. So
whoa! So really quick, what? Just I know we're getting short in time, but like, what is this going to look like? What will this do? I mean, is this going to be like if Tesla got his way in the early 1900s, like going forward, like the world would be, floating cars right now? Is that kind of at the point where we're at, where if we get this nuclear energy changing the way that we look at energy, that, I mean, goodness, the sky's the limit?
Yes, the sky is the limit. And when you're looking at the amount of energy that we have available to us, right? Everyone talks about, how fuel's going to run out and all that. It's like right now, I think there's enough in a available uranium reserve for like 80 years. That's without, sourcing new uranium. And that's just using our current light water reactor designs, right? They use actually 0.7% of the uranium. And so you multiply that times basically 130 or something like that. So now you've taken 80 times 130, and that's, that's not even excluding what we have as other waste products that is depleted uranium, uses like tank bullets and stuff like that in armor that we could then use as fuel. And then you get into thorium, right? I'm gonna give you a little bit of touch on thorium so you don't get, too much beat up on that. But when you get into thorium, now we're, so we have like 80 to like, centuries. We're probably into the thousands of years. And then thorium extends it into like, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. Potentially we could have up to 1 million years of viable energy on planet Earth in the form of nuclear energy.
Whoa, that's pretty darn cool. Well, how about that, folks? That's a call to action right there. I've ever heard one. Explore this as a solution, and we have 1 million years worth of energy right here on good old planet Earth. You don't need to go to Mars or wherever it is that Elon's going to go in the future. So with that being said, Mark, obviously we want to make sure we're able to continue this conversation with folks, because this is something that I'm excited to learn more about, especially as we are heading towards that time for Aurora 2023. That's right around the corner, folks. Believe it or not, it's less than a year and a half away. So with that being said, Mark, where can folks go ahead, follow you, support the work you're doing, and obviously you want to go ahead and learn more?
So you can find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @subschneider, as a sub is in submarine, and my last name Schneider. I like to make it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. That's what they taught me in the Navy. So, that's kind of the biggest thing. And I just kind of advocate. I go in and out of advocating for it just because I get busy in my life. I have 6 kids. I work full time. I'm going to college right now too. So, I've got a busy life. So sometimes I can't do this hobbies as much. But
6 kids. Yeah, you were busy. No kidding there, Mark. Well, Mark, thank you so much. We'll make sure we include all your links there in the show notes, folks. If you want to go ahead and continue the conversation, head over to the show notes, click the links there. And of course, with that being said, Mark Schneider, thanks for joining us on today's episode of the Brian Nichols Show.
Thank you so much.
Alrighty, folks, that's going to wrap up my conversation with Mark Schneider. Thank you, Mark, for joining the program. And I dare say nuclear energy is going to be a conversation that we can lead by example, offering solutions to the problems we see out there And yes, it is a great chance for us to answer those questions that people are asking. Is nuclear energy safe? What do we do about nuclear waste? What about those disasters like Fukushima and Chernobyl? So it's a great chance for us to make sure, number one, we are showing that this is a viable solution. But yes, using this episode as a means to overcome the objections we hear every single day. So please do me a favor, share today's episode. Make sure you go ahead and tag Mark and tag yours truly at B Nichols Liberty, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Also, if you really enjoy the episode, please head to briannicholsshow.com. Give us a 5-star rating and review. You guys have been great, by the way. I think we got like 7 reviews in the past 4 days, so keep that up, by the way. So thank you for that. So tell us, what value do you get from the program? We would love to hear about it, as would the other folks. Again, briannicholsshow.com/reviews. Coming up next week. What? Where's time going? Revolution 21, Young Americans for Liberty, heading down to Orlando, Florida. I will be down there the 5th through the 7th on Media Row, having conversations with movers and shakers in the greater liberty movement. And if you're going to be attending, please do me a favor. Stop by the Brian Nichols Show booth, get a picture, and of course, go ahead and order some awesome swag from Proud Libertarian. Everything that you hear here on the Brian Nichols Show is going to be available for you to purchase right there on our little iPad. So again, head down to a Revolution 21 if you're going to be attending. Stop by the Brian Nichols Show booth. But yes, Proud Libertarian, I hinted at that. We are so excited to have this amazing sponsorship and partnership with Proud Libertarian here at the Brian Nichols Show. briannicholsshow.com/shop. And we have so much amazing stuff in the shop, from our Freedom is Nature / Freedom is Science swag, like laptop cases and stainless steel water bottles. We also have our amazing Cool Mask Bro. I love that one. Cool Mask Bro bumper stickers. What else we have? We have our Question Everything t-shirts, our Alexa Overthrow the Government t-shirts, and of course our classic Don't Hurt People and Don't Take People's Stuff bumper sticker. You can get that over at Proud Libertarians shop there at briannicholsshow.com/shop. Use code TBNS, of course, for 10% off at the Brian Nichols Show shop, as well as everything else at Proud Libertarian. But also you can get this amazing Don't Hurt People and Don't Take People's Stuff bumper sticker if you sign up to be one of our amazing Patreon supporters. And how do you do that? $5, $10 a month. You will be entered to become one of our amazing supporting listeners. And what do you get when you become a supporting listener? Number one, of course, you get the bumper sticker. But number two, access to Chris Goizetta, marketing professor's entire resource of courses that he has been teaching quite literally as a professor in college, teaching marketing. Jeremy Todd has been working on his masterclass to how to be the best salesperson for liberty possible. And of course, you get one-on-ones with yours truly. We're actually going to be doing our first one coming up here on Monday, live with the Patreon listeners. Now, if you want to get your questions, of course, you can email me, Brian at briannicholsshow.com, or go ahead and shoot me a DM. DMs are open on Twitter at B Nichols Liberty. But if you want to be a part of that conversation, an active part of the conversation, Monday, it's going to be live for our Patreon listeners or our Patreon supporters. So if you are one of these amazing people, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this up here, and it's going to start with number one. I can't thank enough the people who have gone out of their way to support the program. It's how we're able to reach more people, how we're able to spread the message of liberty. So thank you to Daryl Schmitz, Laura Stanley, Michael Lemma, Mitchell Mankiewicz, Hody Johns, Craig DaCosta, and the greater We Are Libertarians channel. Thank you for everything you guys do to help keep the lights on here, quite literally, but also help us be able to reach more people, yes, where they are at, as we know our audience, and show them that, yes, libertarian solutions can help make their lives better, make our world better. So with that being said, one final plug, yes, the Sound Mind Creative Group. I adore these guys. They are fighting the good fight, and that is helping set the narrative straight, that these lockdowns have been abysmal, that the quote unquote follow the science crowd has not been following the science. It's been more following these government bureaucrats. By the way, new t-shirt over in the shop. It's Stop Listening to Government Bureaucrats. I love that shirt. Again, briannicholsshow.com/shop. But SoundMind Creative Group, if you are a liberty podcaster, conservative podcaster, I don't care. If you are pro-liberty, that's what I want to talk about. If you are against the lockdowns and you want to have a conversation with the creators of the amazing docuseries Follow the Science on Liberty and Lockdowns, shoot me an email, Brian at briannicholsshow.com. Yours truly and Chris Goizetta are helping the amazing team out there to get them on these amazing podcasts. So again, reach out. I would love to go ahead and make the introduction, and we will get them on your program. That's all I have for you this week. My goodness, it's been a long weekend and we're recording here. It's a Tuesday night, so strap in. You know what you have in store for you on Friday, and it's a weird episode. I'm going to start off. It's not your traditional Brian Nichols Show episode. What started off as originally it was supposed to be a conversation about a variety of topics, kind of turned into a monologue from the guest Michael Johns, going through his it's almost like a Forrest Gump approach to conservative politics. And you'll hear why, because Michael has pretty much had some role in the conservative world in very major public policy for well over 30, 40 years at this point. So you get to hear his really in-depth perspective being there in person, really helping make a lot of the decisions. Now, warning, you're a libertarian or a liberty advocate here and you're more the libertarian camp, you're going to hear a lot of stuff that Michael's going to be promoting, and you're going to be like, oh my goodness. And don't worry, that's not the point of the episode. The more so, the point of Friday's episode is for us to be able to really see how the conservative machine works and how the mindset works. One thing you're going to hear with Michael's conversation, Michael's discussion with himself, it turned into this one kind of overarching conversation that he kind of just kept on going with, which I wanted to let him just keep going with because he was just giving out nugget after nugget. But you hear policy that the conservative institutions talk about more often than not ended up being based on what other policy thinkers were talking about. And there's one very telling moment, and it's sometimes so great when you're a sales guy and you shut up. And honestly, I probably spoke for 5% of Friday's episode, where he says 100% that libertarian ideas are the answer. They work, but they just really haven't been put into action for a variety of reasons. And he leaves it at that. But that was telling because that speaks to me that a conservative who, as you're going to hear, espouses extremely, I would say, more of the Tucker Carlson approach to governance, that he is much more empathetic to libertarian ideas if he was actually able to see them in action working. And that's why we're doing what we're doing here at the Brian Nichols Show. So strap in. Monday's episode, Michael Johns, he has been involved in so many different areas of politics. Strap in for the episode, by the way, folks. It's going to be a little different, but nevertheless, you will leave the episode definitely educated, enlightened, and informed.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.